and those of you who have come here today to say bye-bye Biden, bye-bye Blinken,
Bye-bye.
good riddance to bad rubbish. People ask me, are you really happy that Donald Trump is back in the White House? I put it this way. I'm not happy that Donald Trump is back in the White House, but I am overjoyed that Kamala Harris is not, that Joe Biden is not, that the Biden-Blinken murder gang have been overthrown. They have been regime changed, just like so many others that they have engineered, that Ambassador Ford was just discussing a moment ago. They are gone. They are nothing. They are zilch, nada. They are zero, and they will be remembered only for the trail of blood and shame and disgrace that they leave behind them. I came a little earlier, but I am older than my colleague Chris Williamson, to the realization that the Democrats were actually the greater evil in the duopoly that is United States politics. I believe that America died in November of 1963 in the nightmare on Elm Street in Dallas, Texas, and that every president ever since has been nothing more than a criminal. But the criminals who have waged the greater carnage have always been the Democrats. My first great political awakening was the American war on Vietnam. I ached physically watching, not as we can now in real time, but in dispatches coming days, sometimes weeks after the fact. And I knew that this was a Democratic Party war. This was a war that was waged by Lyndon Johnson, and that though many, many crimes were committed by Richard Nixon, it was the Republicans that negotiated seriously and eventually brought that war to a close. It was a realization that was later, in parallel, arrived at in relation to British politics. The Labour Party, as Keir Starmer is proving every single day, are a greater evil than Rishi Sunak and the Conservative Prime Ministers that went before him. I see Liz Truss is in Washington, by the way. If you go, will you send back a lettuce from America, as the song says, almost. The fact that Keir Starmer is not invited to the inauguration of Donald Trump, but Liz Truss is a measure of the staggering incompetence of the British Prime Minister, who managed to insult. I mean, if he'd asked me, I'd have said, after watching elections for more than half a century, you better be careful taking a side because Donald Trump has a very high chance of winning this. But no, Keir Starmer sent 100 Labour apparatchiks to go and work for Kamala Harris in the election, and then complains about Americans interfering in British politics. But his greatest insult is to appoint as Britain's ambassador to Washington the close friend and associate of the suicided child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. Peter Mandelson sacked from Tony Blair's cabinet. You have to be pretty sordid to be too dirty for Tony Blair's cabinet. He was twice sacked from Tony Blair's cabinet for double dealing, dirty dealing, and corruption. So what's the best thing to do with him? Send him as His Majesty's envoy to the court of Donald Trump. I hope that Donald Trump rejects Peter Mandelson.
Yeah.
He would be doing the British people a favour if he rejected Peter Mandelson in that role. So the ugly story of the last 4 years, and by the way, how's this for an irony? If they hadn't rigged the 2020 election, this would be the last day of President Donald Trump. This would be the last day of his second term, but they rigged the election to get rid of Trump, and now he's back. Now, I don't know Donald Trump. He did listen to some of the early Moat's Mother of All talk shows. I know that for a fact. I don't know him. But my take on him, he's a pretty vengeful guy.
Yeah.
He harbors a grudge. He will not forget all of those who were ganged up against him. And I hope that he includes Keir Starmer in that.
Yeah.
He should differentiate, though, from the British people who never supported Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
Only 19%, in fact, 18.8% of the British electorate voted for Keir Starmer. Only a third of those who voted in the general election voted for Keir Starmer. And so my message to you, President Trump, is don't punish the British people for the fact that we've got an unvarnished, robotic block of wood as our Prime Minister. Help us to get rid of him rather than punish us for having him in 10 Downing Street. Now, some fools who call themselves left-wing mocked us this morning only briefly before taking it down because they realized how foolish it was. Criticized us for having this event to say goodbye to Biden and Blinken, or Blinken and Biden, as I like to put it, for I am perfectly sure that the farther Joe Biden slipped into his dotage, the more Antony Blinken was calling the shots, literally the shots, all over the world on behalf of the United States of America. But let me just summarize what Donald Trump has achieved, and he isn't yet the president. But for him, Palestinian women and children in Gaza would still be being cut to pieces in the Gaza Strip today, but they are not. A ceasefire has been achieved. Trump gave a speech last night. I could have given it myself. He said, I have stopped World War III. And you've no idea, he said, how close we were to World War III under Biden and Blinken. Well, that's a pretty big achievement, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a pretty big achievement to declare that you will not allow the Ukraine imbroglio to drag the whole world into a nuclear holocaust. Gaza ceasefire, no World War III, and, said Trump, I'm going to stop the war in Ukraine. A war which should never have started, which has cost the lives of more than 1 million people and the expenditure of hundreds of billions, if not $1 trillion or more, of wasted treasure, blood and treasure, provoked by NATO, organized by NATO, armed by NATO, funded by NATO, covered for by NATO, shilled for by the NATO media in this country and in others. If Donald Trump goes to Geneva, as I think it will be, and makes a deal with President Putin that brings an end to that slaughter and that waste which has destroyed European economies, impoverished European people, laid cold in their grave Britain's old age pensioners who cannot afford to heat their homes. Isn't that a good thing? Isn't that something we should say is an achievement? If, as he says, President Trump goes to China to meet with President Xi and brings about at least a reduction in the tension and the danger of conflict between the United States and China, isn't that a good thing? Because Biden would never have done any of those things. That's why we are here today. Now, of course, the possibility exists. Let's not use Theresa May's phrase, highly likely, but it's quite likely that Trump will do and especially say things that we don't like, that are ugly, vulgar, inane, idiotic. That's quite likely. But I tell you this, I'd rather take a chance on the Trump presidency rather than the certainty of war throughout the world under Joe Biden and Anthony Blinken and Kamala Harris. And of course, when he does the wrong thing, we'll be back here demonstrating against the Trump administration. But if he does the right thing, then we will applaud it. Yeah. When facts change, so do my opinions, said Groucho Marx. Yeah. And then he asked, what about you? Well, the facts are changing. And I believe, like Chris, that this ceasefire in Gaza will hold. I believe that an agreement over Ukraine will be reached, but they better hurry up or there won't be any Ukraine left to have an agreement with or about. I believe that Trump will, as he said last night, release the files on the murder of John Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and Jeffrey Epstein. Although if I was Trump, I'd release the Epstein one first because that's the one most likely to get him shot. Get that one out first, Donald, while you can. But I cried when Jack Kennedy was murdered on the streets of Dallas. I want to know for sure who killed him. I cried when Bobby Kennedy was killed in a kitchen in California in 1968, and I want to know what really happened. I want to know who killed Martin Luther King. I want to know who killed Malcolm X. I want to know who the customers were for Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah. And Trump is promising to release them. And he should. And he should do so swiftly. If he doesn't, we'll condemn him. If he does, we will congratulate him. That's the kind of common sense socialist party that the Workers' Party of Britain are. Now, no to NATO, no to war, which we started, has become broader. Many people have given their support to no to NATO, no to war, that are not only not in the Workers' Party, but are probably in every other respect against the politics that we stand for. And that was the point. That's why we started it. We wanted to provide a place for the maximum number of people to say no to NATO, no to war. You don't have to share our other politics to be against war and against the war machine that is NATO. So I invite everyone watching, of course, to join the Workers' Party, but in particular and now, to follow No to NATO, No to War, so it can beat the algorithm which is presently strangling it, as so many of you already know. So, it's bye-bye Biden, good riddance to bad rubbish. We hope never to see your face again. God knows the state you'll be in if we ever do have to listen to you again. Kamala Harris, about which I've said little and care less. The Democrats are done. Just like Labour are done. There will never be another Labour government in Britain.
Yeah.
That's how bad the first 6 months of Keir Starmer's government have been. The Democrats are done. Labour are done. Something new is required, and something new is hoving into view, and that, I hope, will be us. Thank you very much indeed for coming to this event today.